discussion today is not to talk about infrastructure or dark fiber or all these terms we've all learned over the last couple of years, but really to talk about how do we use this technology to leverage community economic development and to improve our communities from an economic perspective, but also from a cultural, a social, and an environmental perspective as well. And it's also about how do we stay relevant in the future and competitive in the future. So some of the benefits of leveraging broadband infrastructure include, like I just mentioned, future-proofing our communities by increasing our appeal to investors, retaining and attracting youth and knowledge workers to our region, enhancing innovation in our region, the ability to insource new jobs and also to work remotely, improving lifestyle through access to remote education and telehealth, and that was definitely something that came up in our discussion yesterday, and it was great to hear that people are already thinking about that and talking about how do we get there. And improving conveniences and services for citizens.
Our planned goals, and again this is going to be out in June, by 2016 broadband 5 megabits or better has been extended to 80% of the households who cannot access it today, especially in the small, very rural communities where commercial business case for service providers is lacking. The second one is robust broadband access for at-home business, teleworkers, and students is available and affordable in other places of learning, including distance education. The CBBB open access fiber network has been extended to as many communities as possible. Through partnerships and investment, fiber reaches the region's businesses and households where feasible. Access to and adoption of broadbands allows the region to retain and grow business, create and retain skilled workers, and reinvigorate communities.
But it's also an opportunity for rural communities because in previous years in the old economic development model, we were geographically stuck in our communities. So it was primarily the resources that were around us that we really depended on. And as things have changed, and we all know with resource-based economies, it's boom, bust, and we ride this crazy wave, and it's pretty stressful. Economic diversification is critically important. So what other ways can we look to grow our economies? And one of the key things, it's pretty much everywhere in the literature, is why aren't we taking advantage of the global economy? So broadband economy, global economy, the new economy, they're all talking about the same thing. They're talking about utilizing technology to be able to work anywhere. That whole idea of live here, work anywhere. It opens up markets, it creates employment, it enhances innovation. So it's kind of that new way of thinking. It's a paradigm shift for us to be moving into. What does this tell us? This tells us that there is potential for growth in the knowledge industries, so the folks that are doing the consulting work and similar professional type of services. But we're also seeing that we're a resource-based economy, and that's not something we need to be throwing away. We can't throw it away. So we need to find ways to grow the knowledge economy, but also to be able to nurture our traditional industries and find ways for them to uptake the opportunities that exist within the broadband economy. If you feel that this looks like a bit of a cluster, it's volatile. That's the point of the slide. So this is us, and this is us over the last 12 years. Extremely volatile sectors. Tech companies, knowledge workers, they're the ones that if they don't have good technology, it makes it very difficult for them to do their jobs here. So as I say, we can encourage lots of knowledge workers to come into our region, but if we can't back them up with that backbone, then and the support services, then we're going to be doing a disservice, and we're going to have people that aren't really very happy with us. I now went back to do some research around broadband economies and what communities could do, and education is really at the core. So the knowledge economy, we really like it because it's less volatile. It brings in the creative class. If you have ever read any of Richard Florida's work, it brings in the creative class, it brings in those amenity migrants. The resource economy, we don't want to throw it out. It's important. It always will be to our region. We're resource rich. It's still key, but we need to find ways to help support technology adoption in these traditionally resource-based industries, and it's happening, and it's exciting to watch. So my key point, it's not just about infrastructure, but infrastructure is an essential amenity attractant. Transitioning to the broadband economy, innovative companies and institutions are critical, and we have innovative companies in this region, and we have great institutions in this region. But what do we need to be thinking about? Education and collaboration. I've been saying collaboration for the last 12 years now. We have to work together. Technology needs to be used to transform learning. So it's not just about having the technological tools in the schools, it's about the instructors and the secondary schools actually using these technologies. Critical to equip students, all students, with digital skills. I don't care if they're studying trades or aesthetics or whatever they're doing. Digital technology skills are key. We also want to make sure that we're creating a culture of excellence for all, and that circles back to this concept of learning regions. It's not about the people that have the bums in the seats in the schools today. It's about the people that are out there in our communities, our older population, our marginalized people, that we're actually providing education for all, and educating the skills for the knowledge-based economy, but also educating those knowledge workers. Because if we don't have the knowledge workers here, it's really hard for us to create that culture and to attract other knowledge workers.
It's becoming what I describe as basically the fourth service. You would not buy a house, well actually we're from the Kootenay, so lots of people buy houses without water and stuff. But normally, you would not buy a home without water or power or sewer. It's expected. And when we talk about that fourth utility and return on investment, the other thing that's been proven, certainly in the United States, not a ton of research on it here, but broadband, 20% increase right away in your property, sitting beside an identical house next to you. See if this is a takeaway for you, is that the fiber itself is infrastructure. It's like a road, right? The city's going to pay to build the road in. And then you have your ISPs who are going to run the buses on the road. And they are going to deliver the services along the road. They're going to pay the city for access to that. So if the city owns the road, the ISPs are going to bring in the trucks to bring in the services, which would be the internet or the voice over internet protocols. And the end customers are like the riders on the bus. They're going to pay the bus for that. The bus in turn will pay, hopefully, the city bit. And you may not, or the person you may are talking to may not need high speed, but they should understand their community does. And I'll tell you what, they're going to need it in 3 to 4 years. And I'll talk about the data changes because of this. How many folks have a smartphone? How many folks have more than 3 computers, including, right? And it's basically the cloud is where you're storing something that is not on the device sitting directly in front of you. Now, is it up in some ethereal sort of space with angels? Sometimes it is, when we lose files, and I hope they go to a happier place. But it's not actually up there in the fluff. It's actually sitting in a huge farm somewhere. This incredibly pretty farm is located in Kelowna, and it's Rackforce, which is actually the co-founder of this company lives in Rossland. He'd love to bring his employees to Rossland, but he can't because there's no infrastructure. But look at his infrastructure in Kelowna. And how do our businesses use the cloud? And how does broadband impact that? So when we talk about the competitive nature of our environment and our competitive nature of our businesses, using the cloud or using broadband itself can improve the bottom line. Using these tools also can help me as an organization be more effective, be more efficient, reduce errors, all sorts of good stuff. But I need that broadband infrastructure to do that. Our Nelson office, CF now, has broadband as well. Yo! There's 2 of us. That video, normally what I would do at home is I would leave my computer open, rendering, loading that video up into the cloud, because it would take sometimes 4 hours, 5 hours. And I would get up and hope that it didn't drop the signal and I'd have to start all over again. Imagine my pleasure in the CF office when I loaded the same file and it loaded in under a minute. Bam. One of the great moments I had when we talk about lifestyle out here and being able to work remotely, I've worked remotely for about 15 years. And I was riding up the chair with this dude and he was like, you shouldn't work while you're skiing. I said, I'm not. I said, I'm skiing while I'm working. And he was quiet and he looked at me and he's like, oh, shit. Do they know you do that? And I'm like, oh, yeah. Now you're thinking, right? Jess, that these are your knowledge workers. They're fast, they're moving around, and you know what? If you don't have it, they're going somewhere else. I have peers who work in beautiful places all over the world, Thailand, Africa. They choose to, go where there's an environment that they love and they can do their work. And I know we live in a beautiful place. I know that. But I also know there are some other amazing places in the world. So I would suggest as a group, again, collaborating to decide who are we after, and working together to get them. So for instance, flex working, being able to work from home, we're seeing that trend going way up. And it's becoming culturally acceptable. When I started doing it 15 years ago, we'd lie. Right? We'd be like, yeah, calling from my office. What's in the background? Nothing. And now it's like, Amber, you're on the chair. I'm like, yeah, I am. But it's becoming increasingly popular for a lot of different reasons, because when we talk about retaining employees, these are some of the perks that keep people working for you and happy. And you can attract them with that if you allow them to do some flex work, if you provide them with infrastructure that allows them to do their work well. However, there are other ways to develop economy. And I would suggest that would be, again, reaching out to some of those knowledge workers, developing knowledge workers here, and supporting our businesses here to expand and be more productive, be more relevant. Because the footprint for bringing in these knowledge workers is pretty much zero. And they can bring in, as demonstrated by your statistics, quite a bit of money. We need broadband. There is no question we cannot compete without it. Absolutely. But it's just the first step. There's lots more that needs to take place. And I think as community economic developers, you have a fantastic role to play there.
I bring greetings from Stratford, Ontario, and I hope that the examples, the illustrations will reinforce the good things that are happening here already. And I know that various communities and as a region, you have good things moving forward. So I think part of it is an affirming statement to say, it's good to do, hold the course, and the outcomes sometimes are going to be really obvious, and you're going to say, hey, there's a new job, or hey, there's a company that didn't leave us or didn't move. And sometimes it's not going to be so obvious. And we work in Stratford, at least, on the sort of the luck principle, which is preparation meeting opportunity. So what I will show you in our example are some opportunities that we were able to respond to because we were prepared with our digital infrastructure message, our digital economy message. So when the job opportunities, the employment opportunities presented themselves, we were cued and ready to be able to respond to those. And some saw that as lucky. I'll describe some which were really lucky ones. But it was a matter of being prepared. And so I want to, again, encourage you to consider that and keep that in your philosophy as you work as communities and as a region. So that you know my personal background, it is an ISP. It is a data communications utility that has fiber infrastructure at gigabit speeds and has wireless infrastructure up to about 55 megabits per second wirelessly as a hotspot through the entire city of Stratford. This is a for-profit competitive company called Rhyzome with one shareholder, and that is the city of Stratford. Now, my real hometown is Waterloo, Ontario. Waterloo is where I grew up, and Waterloo is known for its technology. In fact, you'll hear a reference to a group called the Intelligent Community Forum, or ICF, of New York. And Waterloo was the recipient of the #1 community about 8 or 9 years ago. They had a lot of the right things happening in terms of their strategy, their political engagement, their economic engagement, and the infrastructure to support it. But it wasn't always the case that way. And what's interesting in a town like Waterloo is sometimes you can respond with infrastructure and create something that results in a positive outcome. But sometimes if you look at the case, you can't alter what you are, and you will lose, and you will see people leave and go on to do things in other places. So I think one of the real important messages when we speak about our example of Stratford, and I did this with other communities, is as much as we're proud of what we've done, and we'd like to be able to share our ideas, we don't really want you to become us, because we are who we are. Our story, our narrative, our background is who we are. And so I encourage this process to also be a study on who you are and what you can leverage, what you can become based on the assets, the beauty, the culture, the place that you have here in this community. I'm going to give an illustration. I've had sort of, I'll call it a bit of a Forrest Gump life, where I've never been a key player in a major event, but I've always sort of been in the periphery place. So I know through Amber and others that this is ski country. So in my backyard, we had about a 40-foot slope. And we would toboggan and then build ski jumps. And this is in the 60s. So one neighbor got particularly good at ski jumps and other things. And he needed to go somewhere else to be able to find the infrastructure because 50-foot hill wasn't big enough. So that particular neighbor is a guy named Todd Brooker. Todd became one of the crazy Canucks, skied out here out west, skied around the world, had a phenomenal crash in Kitzbühel. But he started in our backyard on the 40-foot slope. So he had to go to where the infrastructure was to sustain what he was good at, where he was going. In the work that we're doing in Stratford and the work I've done in Parry Sound, what part of the strategy has been for economic development revolves around retention of those companies, making sure they're there, making sure they stay, making sure they participate in the digital economy. If each one of those companies adds one employee, you create in your district or region 6,700 new jobs because that one company has added one employee. Now, it's not a news headline. It's not something you can say, hey, we just landed this plant or this new facility or this new employer. It's subtle, it grows slowly, but that's the kind of opportunity or responsibility, depending on what role you're in, you have in terms of economic development, which is nurturing and keeping those businesses healthy, giving them the tools and encouraging them to use the digital economy as a way to grow their business and perhaps create those kinds of jobs. The notion of wired really deals with the idea that you can connect. The notion of smart is being able to take applications, cloud-based applications or web-based applications to address a problem, to improve the efficiency of serving as a restaurant operator, or to improve in terms of capturing registration data as an educator. So these are smart city kinds of things. And we notionally coined our view of intelligent as really being able to use this strategy from an economic and community perspective to create greater livability. We looked at it on our own, and then we looked at it from the lens of this group from New York called the Intelligent Community Forum. I'm not here to pitch them and sell them to you, but I'll say that we went through the journey 4 times with the Intelligent Community Forum to become recognized in their designation process as an intelligent community. Fortunately, 3 of the 4, the last 3 of the 4 that we were in, we were ranked a top 7 community. We found that the Intelligent Community Forum format, their cadence, their structure, their categories, gave us a way to organize our community around meaningful task forces and committees and teams where we could measure where we were and measure those outcomes against a milestone. But these 5 indicators are meaningful indicators to be able to organize yourself around. And what's interesting is they're almost equally weighted. Even though the list is organized from broadband to marketing and advocacy, that's not a priority. You could just have bullets rather than numbers beside it because equal responsibility in each of those 5 categories. But what's also important, it's not like broadband is 100% of those others are meaningless. Truly, broadband or the infrastructure means about 20% of their scorecard. So if you're good at infrastructure, great. But if you're not, don't lose a whole lot of sleep around it because there's other things you can be doing in these other categories that will be meaningful to your local community, particularly around the knowledge workforce, as I was describing. Live in Parry Sound and Cottage in Toronto. So the idea is come up here, enjoy this space, the quality of life, the ambience, the nature, and use broadband connectivity as the tool, as the device to be able to extend your time in the district and the region. And it's working. They're taking people who are coming up for 2-day weekends, and now they're staying for 4-day weekends. Digital inclusion was interesting for Stratford because when we had built out our fiber and put up Wi-Fi, part of putting up the Wi-Fi included free access to the internet for tourists and visitors. But we didn't give them all of the internet, we just gave them the sites for the B&Bs and for the restaurants and for ticket sales. So we tried to make sure that their experience was good while they were visiting Stratford. But because we had the coverage, we could go to our social services department and say, hey, we've got, I think we had 350 social services housing suites that we could provide free internet to using that same infrastructure. So we moved into what was considered digital inclusion. We moved into a place where that couldn't afford necessarily to be on internet, we're now on internet because of the infrastructure we had. Around innovation, I think that's the comment I meant earlier, which is, it's hard to state here's going to be innovation. You want to nurture and create fertile ground for it to happen. We have recently opened a business incubator, and we were fortunate to attract a site of the Accelerator Center into the university campus. So as the business graduates come out of the university program in Stratford, they have a place to stay. They have a place to take their business idea, commercialize it. What you want to be able to do is celebrate what your story is and find a way to brand it. Because at the end of the day, you are in a bit of a marketing play here. You need to be able to communicate your promise, and that's all about branding. What's your promise? My promise is when I get to the Basin, I'm going to have a quality of life, I'm going to have great healthcare and education, I'm going to have access to connectivity, and I'm probably going to have a decent job. But the notion is, this is the path things are on. So to passively sit back as a municipality or as a city and just hope that it benefited us was something we didn't want to do. We needed to be assertive and know that we were going to claim that ground and share our vision as far as a narrative around Stratford as being the place for the digital economy.
You guys, but what are you guys currently doing to help keep your staff here? I thought maybe Amanda, if you wanted to start it off.
And I think overall, it's, again, knowing the needs of the employee and really stressing that our managers be flexible in today's day and age. Again, that Monday to Friday, 4:30 might not work for all of our employees in today's day and age. So, of course, using broadband and other technical solutions for telecommuting has been really key, and the employees really appreciate the flexibility.
So I think one of the things that we do is just around culture, when we're making everybody in the company feel part of the company. So we're a startup, it's a constant struggle for survival. So making people feel part of that success, feeling it's their company. It's not, you describe me as an owner. So I'm not the owner of our company. All of our employees are shareholders, as well as, of course, our investors. So making them feel part of that, I think, is probably the number one thing we do to retain people. Flexibility is a great one, of course, allowing people to work from home on their own flexible schedule. And I think that there are other aspects of our culture around respecting them as people and everything we do around making our company a great place to work. Having an art gallery, having an active arts program, having the Miners Hall and that arts program, that is huge for the knowledge workers that we're trying to attract. They are interested in more than just their job, and they're interested in more than just skiing or biking.
So is there anything specific that helps reason why what keeps you in this area, or why you haven't maybe gone back with your team in Vancouver or worked anywhere else? What keeps you here?
Being from here, that's a tie that binds my family that's here. My wife was originally from here, and honestly, I really felt like this was a place I wanted my kids to grow up in. Another thing with our employees, we've always said from the start, we will limit travel to a maximum of 25% of your time for our employees. And we really wanted to stick by that because, again, Sean and I really grew up in the era where we were on the road a lot.
And what we did was we paid specific attention to their spouses and their children to make sure to keep them out of hot water at home. And that makes a huge difference, I'm telling you.
Maybe first tell us, where do most of your employees come from, and what kind of education could we do here to help organically develop some employees for you?
Really, the reason we're bringing this individual in from Ontario, and his number one reason for accepting the position was the fishing in the area. So all this hard work and postings and advertising and dollars spent, again, knowing your audience and what they're looking for, ultimately it was the Kootenay fishing that allowed us to be able to fill this position. That being said, as far as developing skills locally, some of our entry-level positions, I know we chatted with Gary briefly, at one time Selkirk College had kind of an entry-level engineering program or a technician program that was reduced or cut years back. Continuing to develop programs like that where we can bring in entry-level employees into staff positions, then eventually have them continue to grow and be internally promoted would be great. So,
what channels do you guys do, or what things do you guys do to get people to know that this place exists and that there are jobs here? What kind of channels? Maybe Jim, tell us, since people are working remotely, how do you find those people and how do you get that word out to them?
I think the marketing that I'd like to see done around the region is really, in Rossland especially, and probably this is true regionally, is really partnering with the tourism marketing that goes on. In Rossland, we have really great tourism marketing, I think. And I work with Deanne quite a bit, our tourism person, and her job isn't to market Rossland as a place to reload to, it's only to market as a place to come and spend your vacation. I think coupling onto that and partnering with that and getting it out that you want to relocate here, that's something I think we could really do. That's the message I'd like to see us saying, is become known as that place everybody wants to relocate to. That would be a really great message that's out there all the time that would help me the most.
I meet a lot of people that are in similar scenarios where they've come here maybe with already an established career and are looking to maybe work from here for another company or whatever. And you know, it turns out they just came here for a vacation or were passing through, and all of a sudden they're like, you know, I love Nelson and I wanted to stay here. Thus, I've tried to make a job here. I've tried to make a company here. I really wanted to be here. There wasn't maybe the opportunity in my area of expertise, but I really wanted to be here, so I'm trying to make something work here. And that's really my story too, right? I wanted to be here, and the opportunity just happened to be, you know what? I have a good friend who wanted to start a company and do what we love to do, and we kind of made it go that way. So I totally agree. I think Nelson and some of these areas have some really good programs to get visitors here, and I think if we can leverage that same sort of message to people that are looking for careers here, or hopefully, you know, with these broadband initiatives and things like that, where if you're starting a company, here might be a really cool place to start it too.
So I do hear lots of stories of people returning home. You know, as Darren said, Gary came here, you know, as his vacation home. We see a lot of that happening. We hired a young guy in Roslyn recently, a new grad who'd grown up in Roslyn, went away to school at UVic and came back, and he was just about to give up and leave again, assuming he would never find a tech job. So we definitely see that, people coming back, but I don't know, as a fundamental strategy to assume you're going to somehow get your word out there, I don't know. I think that the thing I'd be looking to do is to generate a buzz, a message that this is a hub of innovation, this is a hub of cool places, and that's why you would want to open an office there. And we talked to about 60 small, and these are mostly very small, one-person businesses, and we asked them, one of the questions we asked all of them was, you know, why are you here? How did you get here? And maybe a quarter were people who had grown up here and they returned and they brought their business there. But most of them had the story was, well, I was here skiing at Red, and I was on a chair with a guy who told me he worked here. And it struck me, oh my God, I could work here. And I heard that again and again and again, and it's roughly my story as well.
How often would you say you get together with other entrepreneurial folks, and how important is that to your business?
No real group that I get together sort of talking entrepreneurship. I mean, maybe that is a good idea. Maybe that's something that is just part of CAST mandate or something that goes on that to make people more aware of that. And there are sort of resources and other people to talk to and share experiences with about how they got going. Because again, if people want to come here, or people that are already here want to, you know, branch out and try something, you know, it's good to have some sort of someone to talk to and help work through how did you guys do it and how did you make it happen.
These are my words, not theirs. They all felt more or less lonely because they work at their one-person office by themselves all day. They may work with people that, you know, none of them worked with people in Roslyn. They were all telecommuting or, you know, or just their customers were far away. And they were all, that was essentially what they were saying was this, they were looking for networking opportunities with people like them in a way that made sense to them. And I think that is something that could be done more of, is to create, because it not only creates a sense of networking amongst those people, it also creates a buzz. If you talk about it and you market that, then you've got another attractant for people. It's like, oh, I could be part of that community because that community sounds really cool.
The local communities, we're kind of the success story. As you know, the company started as a two-man operation. We're now a public company. We've got 200 employees here. We've got a Mexico factory with 500 employees. We opened a US office. So not only attracting and retaining the small companies, but being sure that the communities can support as these small companies continue to grow, which is like you're talking with the introduction of Broadband here and other initiatives that can continue to support again, as these small businesses continue to grow and we want to increase and have success, making sure that the community is in a position to support that. So I think that's just another factor that has to be addressed as well. Like you said, getting back to the original point, lifestyle, community, all of that plays a huge part in recruiting for us as well.
What are those things that either are here but aren't quite good enough, or aren't here yet that we should have, that are those infrastructure pieces that make it possible for people to relocate and start these businesses?
to make sure that we as businessmen and business community continue to lobby for a tax regime that is favorable to startups. I mean, many startups get lost in the early going because of cumbersome bureaucracy and costs. And generally, the cost isn't the price of the permit. It's delay times and inefficiencies in getting their permits. So we have to continue to lobby to make sure that we're streamlined as a community to give these new startups and their families every opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, I can't let that one go by. I mean, the number one thing that we see from an infrastructure point of view is transportation. Getting in and out of here is really hard, and it's a really big barrier. It's a barrier to just running your operation. It's a barrier to get people to reload here because they realize just how trapped they're going to be here. It's a barrier for investment. I have trouble convincing investors that we could possibly run a business in a place as trapped as here. It's just a huge problem. I realize it's really hard to do anything about it. And actually, broadband does address it. In some ways, it reduces the need for travel. But if there is, besides marketing and telling the story, the other that I always put first because it's something you can actually do something about. But if anything that could be done to help address the transportation issues would make a huge difference for this region.
First of all, I'll echo Jim because that's a huge issue on Pacific Insight's table as well as transportation. Can't stress that one enough for sure. But yeah, second of all, we were talking with some managers and I was telling them about this panel that we were going to participate in, and one of the managers said, oh, well, something you should bring up is power outages. And most people think, oh, the power was out for half an hour or 15 minutes. Well, when you're running a manufacturing plant and you're calculating revenue per employee and that power's down for an hour, it becomes a huge loss.
I'm going to echo the transportation thing because again, as part of my job, I do have to go visit customers, and that tends to be across Canada and parts of the U.S. And this is not an easy place to get out of. So, as part of that, then as well as like you said, broadband's been beaten to death. But I think that goes together, like you said, with the electrical infrastructure because that is a major issue for even myself. So, as we mentioned, getting more employees here. I'm here. I have another remote employee here. When the internet doesn't work, when you are running a model like that, this is not our head office. We have no data center here. We are pretty much out of work, and much like the factory floor, there's now 2 people sitting in here in Nelson who are losing a lot of productivity. In this changing environment, so the IT world's really changing. Everybody knows this whole cloud thing is coming, right? It's something we're stressing a lot. What the opportunities are is we no longer need to be on site. We no longer need to be physically at a client helping care and feed their environments. They're saying, you take the platform and manage that for us as a whole infrastructure piece. Or, the CIOs we're talking to now are saying, give us the solution and run that solution for us and we will just access it. That is an amazing business opportunity. You can run that from here. Maybe your data center's not here. The data center's maybe in Amazon Cloud or IBM SoftLink or some other place. But to manage those applications, to give the service levels that these companies will be demanding, you need reliable power and internet.
If there was one thing that economic development folks could do that you think would help the scenario to either attract people, keep people, or get the logistics in place to allow it to happen, any of those 3 or perhaps all 3?
We could get together and create a strategy for the community is to get us to embrace a message that change is good for our community and try and get as many people as possible to buy into that. The one thing that surprised me about the discussion yesterday was that people were still talking about how we have to force technology change on people because they don't understand the benefits immediately. And that was our case with accountants who should have understood the calculation benefits immediately, and yet we still had to sell it. So selling that change is good in a small community that tends to fight change would be the number 1 priority for me in terms of getting this thing going.
So again, I would echo Gary for sure, just getting everybody on board with change is not a bad thing, growth is not a bad thing. It will help to support and bring dollars into the community.
I see the same problem. I guess I'm going to couple that to a different number 1 for me, which is marketing and telling our story as a business location. So like I say, I think leveraging what we do for tourism marketing that's really great and turning it into also a message around business. And I think that also addresses that. I think one of the groups, what happens when you market externally to tell this message about business, it gets internalized here. And I think part of that marketing can also happen internally here around, this is a location for business, here's some business success stories, here's what we're doing to promote business and support business. I think that marketing works both to bring people here, but also to retain people here and also change the minds of people around that anti-growth, even anti-business attitude.
You know, I think it's pretty much summed up by Jim, because I think there's similar scenarios where it's that marketing message that it's a great place to be, and there's a lot of benefits to being in a small community, and the more we can support that, I think more people will want to come here.
The economic development committees continue to do what they're doing here, which is to work together within the region rather than being polarized, because we're not the competition with each other. The competition's out there somewhere. We need to work together to get people here and to promote the entire region, and I think that would be a big issue.
One thing about collaboration I just wanted to mention, it's an interesting word. We all say we do it or we need to do it. It's one of the hardest things to practice.
What does collaboration mean to me? I think really it's about having a shared vision and bringing folks to the table that own that shared vision together and moving forward in a way that everybody has a part and everybody has a role.
And despite all the operational and institutional barriers, we're going to get her done.
I mean, I think we have huge amounts of expertise in the tech and the broadband field in the basin, and if we're really going to develop a strategy that's meaningful for the Columbia Basin, the Boundary region, I mean, I think we should tap into these people. I think we should form a larger committee, that's a steering committee to drive that initiative, and I think the more private sector people we have at the table, I think will benefit the initiative, and I think that would really move that along if we have steering committees, the trusted steering committees for economic development, for social development, for environmental development. I think this broadband initiative is equally as important, and I think we need to have more players, more knowledgeable people at the table to help drive that initiative.
What geographic regions is it reasonable to collaborate within? I mean, because we've got an example here at Lower Columbia, the Nelson Area Economic Development Partnership. You've got different geographic sizes for different organizations. Is it reasonable to even assume that someone from Golden is going to have something in common with someone from Yak or from Revelstoke or from Nikask?
So I think we have to band together to have our voice heard, and I think it's a challenge. The biggest challenge for us is a geographic area. It's huge, it's pretty rugged, but I think we have to work together to benefit all the communities.
We'd like to see the dialogue obviously take place throughout the entire Columbia Basin, but maybe there needs to be some strength over in the west, some strength in the east, and the boundary, and then pull all of that together as a unified voice.
From the Lower Columbia Initiative's perspective, I think that we are a little bit farther along the chain on broadband, and I think we could really be a resource for the other communities as they're continuing this process.
I think that really what it's about is shared learning and a commitment to shared learning. Everybody's going through this journey. I don't think the convincing needs to happen that broadband is important anymore. It's really how can we come together to help each other benefit from what each other's learning. But it's that shared learning opportunity, and I think that within broadband, that is something that can be done across the basin at the same time. I don't think we want to see this drag on, and I think we need to really look at some efficiencies on those learning points. We need to know right now what other communities are doing, what they're researching, what financial models are you looking at. We don't want people to have to wait. So if communities are putting some energy into researching that, let's see that shared out so that community B doesn't have to start at the same point that community A had to start at. And I think that that's where we have that collaborative advantage when it comes to our journey in broadband, is that there's so many communities doing it at the same time. And what we know of in terms of collaboration is that when you come together in collaboration, there's innovation. So the next community can learn and do it better from how the first community has moved forward. So did I answer your question?
Maybe. So given that there are 5 potential groups to engage, who provides the leadership and what's the next step in moving this broadband thing along?
Certainly CBT plays a lead role in the Columbia Basin Broadband Corporation, and that is something that CBT has been working on. Well, I've been at CBT 5 years, and we kind of started it when I first came on board. And then we're also there to support communities that are committed to moving forward with their broadband initiatives, do some planning, making sure that their strategies are ready to go. And Nelson can certainly speak to that experience as well as Trail. And then there's the Regional Broadband Steering Committee, and Alan has some good input for that group. And that is an opportunity where CBT is providing sort of more of a backbone support, so not driving that initiative, providing the resources to help that steering committee move forward. And then in individual communities, we've got business groups that are coming together to try to speak to the leadership in those communities of the importance of the broadband initiatives. We have commissions or committees that have been struck by councils to move forward to help the councils better understand the conundrum of broadband. So I think that there's a lot of different players, some being catalysts, some being the leaders, some being the facilitators. So I think that there's a lot of really excellent momentum in the basin, and certainly I think if there's any ways of gelling that a little bit more, I think that's what everybody's kind of wanting to come together in here.
Get ready for the economic opportunities that would be derived from your community, both the businesses and the homes being connected to the broadband world. Get the plan in place so that when broadband comes, you can take advantage of it.
But I do think that with those 5 pillars that we've talked about earlier today, that I think there's some discussions now going forward how to take all of those into consideration before we even start talking about, yeah, we're going to just have a software cluster downtown, or we're just going to have, the healthcare cluster downtown, or a metallurgical cluster of businesses downtown. That there's much more discussions need to take place.
I think we get hung up on broadband, and what we forget is we do have broadband. So, and when I say we do have broadband, we may not have the broadband at the speed that we need, but we do have internet access. And when you talk about digital inclusion, you don't need broadband for a community to come around and embrace a digital inclusion strategy. We still have kids that are at home without internet, that don't have computer access. So they're not able to fulfill the requirements, basic educational requirements, certainly in high school when they need to be doing research. So I really think that we need to step back in terms of what we think we need when it comes to broadband in order to be an intelligent community. As Paul indicated, when you look at those 5 pillars, and when they actually do the assessment of whether or not you're an intelligent community, broadband has the same weight as the other pieces. So I really think that around digital inclusion, innovation does not necessarily need broadband in order to happen. So I think that it's really important, absolutely, I mean that's what we're here talking about is broadband piece, but in order to actually fully embrace the broadband, our rural communities need to step up in quite a few places, because even where we're at right now, we are so miles ahead from urban centers where they were at before they had high-speed broadband. So I really think that it's a great question that you ask, and it's something that we do need to reflect, because otherwise we're not even going to be ready to fully embrace the full potential around what true broadband can bring to us.